This is Surrender to Win, a look at what's holding you back from experiencing a life of peace and joy that God intends for us all. Your host is Brian Anderson, the program director and a substance abuse counselor at Rob's Ranch, a Christ-centered residential substance abuse treatment facility for men in Purcell, Oklahoma. This is Surrender to Win.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I hope you guys are having a great Friday. I hope you guys have had a great week. And, man, I'm just grateful that you're joining us again. I am your host, Brian Anderson. This is the Surrender to Win show. I am the program director and a substance abuse counselor at Rob's Ranch. And, man, I'll tell you what, I am incredibly grateful that I get the opportunity to do what I do. I get to try and help people who are struggling with the disease of addiction and other mental health disorders. And, Rob's Ranch is a Christ-centered facility. And so, I get to talk about Jesus Christ. I get to talk about God. I do not absolutely force it down anybody's throat. And, it's not even my job to try and convince anybody that they need to, believe in Jesus Christ or they believe in God. That's just what I believe in. And all I do is share a message, and, each individual gets the opportunity to decide for themselves what they want to believe in and or what they don't want to believe in. And I think, I think that's okay. Again, it is not my job to convince anybody of anything. And so, welcome back. I've got a pretty cool topic today. At least I think it is. And the title of today's topic is Inside the Addictive Personality. And on some of the other shows that I've had, I've talked about the disease of addiction. I've talked about relapse symptoms. I've talked about some distorted thinking. I've talked about all kinds of stuff. But today I want to talk about, what is inside the addictive personality, if you will. And I don't, when I say addictive personality, I'm not talking about like, you'll hear some people say, oh, I just got an addictive personality. I just eat too many chocolate chip cookies or whatever. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the personality of a human being and what that personality looks like when they are in an active addiction. And so this is looking inside the personality and some of those personality traits and the behaviors and kind of what's going on inside that person whenever they are active in the disease of addiction. And absolutely, I call this a disease. I believe with every ounce of my being, every fiber of my being, that addiction is a disease. It currently meets the disease model. And one of the struggles, well, I guess I wouldn't even say it's a struggle. One of the things that I experience when I talk to people about the disease of addiction is that there is still a huge population out there that just simply refuses to believe that that addiction is a disease. There is a huge segment of the population that still is going to hold on to an archaic belief that it's all about choice. Well, they should just not use. They should just not drink. Now, that belief system works whenever you apply it to somebody that does not have the disease of addiction. I've said before, you take my wife as an example. She does not have the disease of addiction. And she could, get a glass of wine or beer or whatever she chose to drink. And she might even drink in excess to where she becomes intoxicated. But she's not going to experience the physiological cravings and biological changes that occur in a person who has an active disease of addiction, whether it's to alcohol or any other substance, any other mind-altering substance. She's not going to have it because she doesn't have the disease of addiction. Now, if I, had some way was able to have my wife drink beer or wine in large quantities every single day or almost every single day, over a period of time, at some point, she very well could become chemically dependent upon alcohol. She very well could become an alcoholic, and the disease of addiction could manifest. We, as a biological organism, as a human being, we are eligible for the development of the disease of addiction, just by the very nature of us being a living organism. And mood-altering substances, substances that are psychoactive, that change the way we feel and change the way we think, changes the dopamine levels inside of us, raises those dopamine levels, or whatever the substance does to it. Any of those substances introduced into a living organism has the potential of developing the disease of addiction. It's been scientifically proven. And so to simply say that the drug addict and the alcoholic out there, it's just a matter of choice, they just need to just not do whatever that drug is it's just simply a fallacy. It's an invalid statement and an invalid argument. It's not a popular one, because there are so many destructive behaviors and so many things that we don't want to have to see and have to deal with when somebody is active in their addiction. And by no means do I ever solicit for the for somebody not being responsible for their behaviors, even if they are in the midst of their active addiction. Somebody goes out and robs a bank or a car or something like that to get money to be able to buy their drug of choice. I by no means whatsoever say, well, they shouldn't be held accountable for robbing that bank, or well, they shouldn't be held accountable for that because they've got the disease of addiction. That is not what I'm advocating, and I never will. I truly believe that all human beings who are of sound mind and are capable of understanding the difference between right and wrong, they should be held accountable for their behaviors, whether they are under the influence of an intoxicating substance or not. So please, anybody who adamantly disagrees with me, please understand that I am not trying to absolve anybody for the responsibility for their behaviors, even if they're in their active addiction. But with that being said, active addiction does cause people to do things that they normally wouldn't do because they are either under the influence or they need to feed their addiction because of the physical and biological phenomenon of craving that occurs when somebody is chemically dependent upon a substance. One of the examples that I provide very often to clients that I work with and even their family members, and I've used it on this show before, is using the example of tobacco. Tobacco's actually, folks, it kills more people than all the other drugs combined. And the drug of nicotine, whether it is administered by cigarettes, smokeless tobacco, vapes, or any other method out there, the drug of nicotine is a psychoactive drug that changes the brain chemistry and is an addictive substance. And so any human being out there that is addicted to nicotine, by definition, by clinical definition, and by therapy definition, is a drug addict. Nicotine is a drug. Anybody addicted to it is a drug addict. Now, that one is tough for the majority of society to accept or believe because the term drug addict has such a negative connotation to it. But it doesn't preclude the fact that any person addicted to nicotine has the disease of addiction and is a drug addict to the substance nicotine. Now take that person who is addicted to nicotine and watch their behaviors if they have a period of time where they're not able to introduce the nicotine into their body by whatever method of delivery they use. And it may only need to be an hour or two. Some people less than that. You will see a physical change. They will get irritable. They might even start bouncing their legs around. They may, get fidgety, intolerable. And you go any longer than that, and they're going to start having difficulty sleeping at night. They're going to have differences in cravings of food and their hunger level. And these are physical responses. These are physical cues for the body going through that biological state of depletion of nicotine, needing the nicotine. You'll even see people start to change their behaviors and might even start lying. And what do I mean by that? Oh, hey, I need to go and go out to my car for a second or whatever. And when the real motivation, though, is for them to go and ingest nicotine. Or, people will sneak it and use it where they're not supposed to, just to get that drug introduced into their body, because they are having a physical and psychological reaction to not having enough of the substance in their body. And folks, that is about as basic as I can get with the disease of addiction. And those same principles are valid regardless of the substance: alcohol, methamphetamines, opiates, marijuana. That it's just the science behind it. And so as we go into talking about what that addictive personality, inside that personality of somebody who is active in their addiction, you can start to use a lot of these things that I talk about with people who are addicted to nicotine. It may not be on the same grand scheme or the same scale, but you can still see kind of, if you're willing to have the open mind, you can see the parallels between it. So we'll be right back, and then we will get into the inside workings of that addicted personality. Back in a minute. You're listening to Surrender to Win on Crossover Radio.
Radio with a purpose.
Are you a small business looking to enter the advertising market without breaking your budget? Well, I've got the solution to your problem. Crossover Radio. We are an internet radio station with worldwide reaching possibility, but locally embedded in the Bethany and War Acres area in Oklahoma. We have competitive advertising packages to help you reach new customers and grow your business. If you're a well-established business, we're here for you as well. We're able to handle all the advertising needs your business requires. We're also launching a crossover radio sports station in May of 2019 that will cover pro, high school sports, and everything in between, doubling your reach and advertising capabilities. To partner with Crossover Radio and grow your business, please contact us at contact@thecrossoveronline.com or by phone at 405-494-0234. Crossover Radio, radio with a purpose.
I just love it out here. It's so peaceful, and you get chills when you come out, and you feel the presence of God, man. You know, it's something, and the feelings, that's something a lot of us have never had.
Opiates, meth, alcohol. Are you addicted? Rob's Ranch is a nonprofit, Christ-based treatment center for men located in central Oklahoma. Rob's Ranch uses proven treatment methods and a program of spiritual growth to give men the opportunity to restore their lives and their relationships. Every member on staff has been there and are now in recovery themselves. If you or a loved one is struggling with addiction to drugs or alcohol, please call 405-253-3838 or find Rob's Ranch on Facebook or online at robsranch.org.
They're just so accepting, so caring. It'll change your life if you're not careful.
On live, worldwide, 24/7, 365. It's Crossover Radio, radio with a purpose.
Hey, welcome back to the show. We are going to take a look inside the addictive personality. Hope you're having a great Friday. It is summer and I am enjoying the weather. I am not a fan of cold weather, so I'm enjoying us having a summer. So before we left for the break, I was talking about the disease of addiction and the disease of being addicted to nicotine, and that nicotine itself, it's more destructive and kills more people than all the other substances out there in the world. And so, again, I ask for those of y'all listening, as I go through some of these, points on inside the addictive personality, to not only think about the more, better known, or I guess more acceptable destructive drugs like alcohol and opiates and amphetamines, methamphetamines, benzodiazepines, the list goes on and on. Start looking at this also at the similarities of people's behavior when it comes to trying to feed their addiction to nicotine. And I challenge you that you're going to see the similarities. And the reason you're going to see the similarities is because nicotine is a drug. And people who are chemically dependent upon nicotine are clinically a drug addict. It's funny when I initially talk about that to people, especially those who are addicted to nicotine. A lot of people get pretty upset with me, and they want to argue with me about it. And so I know it's not a popular view, but I don't make this stuff up. I just regurgitate the information that I know, that I've learned, and through the sources that I've learned. So, all right. So inside the addictive personality, one of the first things that A person who starts to take a substance experiences is what we call a mood change, and that is the beginning of an internal change state. So the person takes the substance, whether it's nicotine, whether it is opiates, alcohol, any of those other substances. The person takes that substance and they experience a change in their mood. They experience a mood change. And once that person experiences a mood change, there's something that goes on in their brain that says, you know what, I like the way this is changing my mood. And a lot of times you will see alcoholics and addicts, at some point in their life, they were having an emotional feeling, they had a mood, they had a problem, they had something that they didn't like, and they were introduced, or they were able to introduce a chemical into their bodies that created a change in their mood. And for the most part, I would say, if not exclusively, that it was a positive mood change. If it was a negative mood change, most people wouldn't do it again. But it was a positive mood change. And that person now makes a connection. Hey, I didn't feel good. I didn't like the way my emotion was. I didn't like the way my mood was. I didn't like the way this problem was making me feel. I took this chemical and it made me feel better. Now, the degree at which it makes you feel better that's substance dependent. But even nicotine, when somebody takes nicotine, it changes their mood. It may be very slight, but it changes their mood. And the longer they go without the nicotine, the more of a mood change they will get whenever they take the substance again. So what happens is the addict starts to seek out relief from their problems and for their negative mood state by turning to the object of their addiction, whatever that may be. And this also includes process addictions like gambling, sex, pornography, compulsive spending, and a whole ton of other disorders that go on with this. A person can experience a mood change from that, and they will start to seek out relief from any future problems or anything else that they come in contact with by turning to the object of that addiction. And the more they do that, the more that reinforces that bond between problem or problems, substance or process addiction or whatever the object of their addiction is, and they create a strong relationship between that. I have a problem. I don't like the way I feel. I don't like my mood. Turn to the object of my addiction. That makes me feel better. A positive mood change has been experienced. I like that. I'm going to keep doing the behaviors or the substance that I'm addicted to. And that's that internal change state. And then we go into a negative conversion experience. And that means that there becomes pleasure from the mood change. And that pleasure from the mood change becomes all important. Meaning that is what's important. And that starts to change position of priorities in the addict or alcoholic's life. And this also works the same with nicotine. I have talked to people and I've worked with people who would not go over to other people's houses or travel with them in a car because they weren't allowed to use their delivery method of nicotine. Well, that's because their addiction to nicotine has become all important. and it has taken over all other priorities and has become, an all-important thing to the addict, to the point of avoiding relationships or avoiding things that they're not going to be allowed to freely use their substance. Now, with the introduction of vapes, and we've had the nicotine gums and lozenges and patches and all that stuff for a little while now, but with the introduction of those different delivery methods, the delivery method, especially of vaping, mostly was designed around minimizing the repulsive smell and dirty nastiness of cigarettes themselves. And it was marketed and is still marketed as a safer alternative, medically or biologically a safer alternative than your more traditional delivery methods of nicotine like smoking. And that may very well be the case, but that's not the part I'm interested in. The part I'm interested in is all vaping is just a different delivery method for nicotine. Now, you might be asking yourself, why am I spending so much time on nicotine? Well, the reason I'm using nicotine is because nicotine meets and fits every single criteria of the disease of addiction. But most of the time when people hear of someone being an addict, they think of the street substances or the bad substances, or even, opiate pain medication now, those, or alcohol. That's what people think when they hear of, oh, he's a drug addict. And so I want to focus on using nicotine as my example today, because nicotine is a psychoactive drug. And the principles and properties of addiction fit exactly the same as it does with heroin, meth, and all the other psychoactive drugs. You probably are not going to see the same destructive behaviors that you do with, say, somebody on heroin or meth or alcohol or anything like that. But the behaviors are a byproduct of the substance. So I use nicotine because that is the most widely used drug across the world, even more than alcohol. Okay, so that negative conversion experience, the person experiences that pleasure from the mood change that they get, and that mood change becomes all important. And the longer that they take that substance, and the longer that they get into they're active in their disease of addiction, that the importance of that mood change goes higher and higher and higher on the list of priorities. And as you get into the more, destructive drugs, meth and heroin, that priority, that prioritization goes even higher and higher, faster and faster, to the point to where the drug addict and alcohol, all they will do, even over eating, sleeping, sex, all those basic survival needs, they will move that drug, the pleasure from that drug becomes number one. It becomes the number one priority in the alcoholic and addict. And that's why we see such unbelievable, mind-boggling, and baffling behaviors from the drug addict and alcoholic when the drug and that mood change has basically taken over the number one spot on the priority list of things for that human being. So we'll be right back, and we'll pick this up on the other side.
You're listening to Surrender to Win on Crossover Radio. Radio with a purpose.
this is Big Nate, Program Director here at Crossover Radio, and I just wanted to let you know that Crossover Radio is now the flagship station for Bethany Bronco Athletics. Sponsorships will be filling up fast, so to join in and promote your business, contact the station by phone or by text at 405-494-0234 for more information. And go Broncos!
My name is George Schaefer.
And I'm Meredith Schaefer. Together, we are founders of STORM, Strategic Treatment Options and Recovery Ministries.
And we provide an individualized blueprint of recovery for both the addict and their family members, regardless of the situation in which they find themselves.
And starting in March 2019, we are opening up a sober living home for men called the Storm Shelter.
For more information, please visit our website at www.storminc.org.
Or you can call our office line, 405-503-7442. Join us in fighting for the eradication of the epidemic of addiction.
You're listening to Surrender to Win with Brian Anderson on Crossover Radio. Radio with a purpose.
Hey, welcome back. You're going to pick up on that addictive personality, taking a look at the inside of that addictive personality, kind of what goes on inside the addict when they are active in their addiction. You know, if there's one thing that I hope I can get across people, and this may be one of the biggest challenges I have working in the field of addiction, is trying to challenge people to see and understand that the disease of addiction doesn't care what the substance is. And the substance itself doesn't matter when it comes to the disease of addiction. It doesn't matter if it's alcohol. It doesn't matter if it's nicotine. It doesn't matter if it's heroin. It doesn't matter if it's marijuana. It doesn't. And yes, folks, marijuana is an addictive substance. I don't care what High Times magazine says. I don't care what the internet says, you know, on whatever pot website or what, you know, dispensaries. I don't care. Pot is a psychoactive substance. And any substance that is a psychoactive substance, any behavior, sex, porn, gambling, etc., that manipulates the levels of dopamine and other chemicals inside the brain to the level that these substances do, to the level that marijuana does, the biological organism, the human being, can become addicted to it. It's been proven. But even with all that, there's still a huge, huge percentage of population of people who just simply will not believe it. And I'm okay with that. That's not my problem. It's simply not my problem. But it is a challenge trying to, you know, encourage people to understand that all of these things I'm talking about inside that addictive personality, they occur to, you know, one level or another, to a varying degree, with any substance that a person is addicted to. And in a lot of the process addictions, those behaviors, gambling, sex, pornography, materialism, compulsive spending, those type of things. So, along the lines also with the negative conversion experience, addicts start to use abnormal forms of a relationship. And that abnormal form of the relationship is that relationship with the substance or the process addiction, the behavior, the gambling, the sex, the porn, the compulsive spending, the addict develops an abnormal relationship with that. And then they start to use that relationship to deal with all the other human issues that are going on in their life. And each time they do that, it is a form of self-betrayal. It is something that damages self-respect. It starts to damage their self-confidence. And each time we do those things, little by little, and some of this, especially at the very beginning, it's very, very tiny, almost maybe imperceptible on the conscious mind. The diminishment of the individual's self-respect and their self-confidence, and they continue to conduct self-betrayal behaviors and behavioral patterns. And that is evident and self-evident in anybody with the disease of addiction. And the catch-22 of addiction is that the source of that addict's emotional stability also becomes the source of their unmanageability in life. And that is the catch-22. And you'll talk to a lot of people who are recovering drug addicts and alcoholics that will tell you that in the latter stages of their addiction, before they got into recovery, the very thing that they were using to try to just survive and feel normal was the very thing that continued to destroy them and make them feel abnormal and create more problems and unmanageability in their life. And that is a horrible, horrible position to be in, that you don't have any other solution than that. Addicts have what I call an addictive narcissism. An addict feels different when they are living in their addictive side. They feel different than the rest of the world, than the rest of the population. And you talk to anybody who has been in recovery or is in recovery from an addiction, and they will tell you that while they were in their addiction, they felt different from the rest of the world. They might have felt like they feel the same as the other people that they're using with, or, they're drinking with. And that's a lot of the reason why addicts and alcoholics will congregate together, and they, the old saying of birds of a feather flock together. Well, that's true with alcoholics and drug addicts as well. And it's also true with people who use nicotine. Go outside, the one designated place in a building or outside in a parking lot. And yeah, granted, everybody's there because that's the only one place that they can do it. But I guarantee you, when you go ask somebody who's sitting there using their nicotine delivery method out there in the middle of the parking lot in a snowstorm, they're going to tell you they probably feel different. If they're going to be honest, they probably feel different than everybody else that's sitting inside that warm, cozy building, not having to go outside into the parking lot in the snowstorm to ingest their nicotine. The addict feels different inside whenever they are active in their addiction. And it's just part of how this works. Over time, as the person stays longer and longer in their active addiction, the addictive personality becomes their primary personality that interacts with everybody else in the world. And you'll see this when you talk to family members and you talk to friends, and they'll say, man, he's just not the same person. He's a different person. I miss the old so-and-so. And they're right. the addict is not the same person. And the old personality is hibernating, if you will. It's dormant. It's not gone. That person still exists inside. But unfortunately, the drugs, the alcohol, the process addiction, the addiction to porn or gambling or sex or those things, that personality becomes the primary personality that everybody else in the world sees and interacts with. And that's the personality, the addictive personality. That's what people loathe so much. I couldn't even begin to tell you how many parents I've talked to and I've listened to when they're talking to their kids say, man, I love my child, I love my husband, I love my wife, but I can't stand, I hate their behaviors. I hate the addict. And that is a valid feeling and a valid point. Because you're not dealing with the genuine personality of the person. You're dealing with the addictive personality. It doesn't exclude or doesn't preclude the addict from being responsible and needing to be held accountable for those behaviors, but you're not dealing with the real person. The real person is buried deep down inside, covered up by a bunch of substances and emotions and negative behavioral patterns. It's just not the same person. And then finally, over time, the addict becomes dependent on that addictive personality. That's the only one that they recognize anymore, and they become completely dependent on it. And then the addict goes into stage 2. And this is where we start to see a consistent and permanent, semi-permanent, I say permanent as long as they're active in their addiction. But they have a permanent lifestyle change. And they have a behavioral commitment, meaning their behaviors they're committed to the addictive process. And when that happens, the addict is now in complete control of that human being. The addict personality is in complete control, not the person's real self. And at that point, all learning stops. Any and all spiritual development stops. And the person just becomes what I've been told by other people is they become a hollow shell, empty. And you can see this emptiness when you look in a person's eyes that is in active addiction. It's like something's missing. And I've heard people say it's like the light's off. And I've seen it over and over again. And it's true. That's what it looks like, as though the person is not there. The light is turned off. Come on back. And on the other side of this, we'll finish up the inside of the addictive personality.
Hey, this is Coach Coleman, and I'm the play-by-play voice for your Bethany Broncos. I know there's a lot of guys out there who are trying to kick that nasty tobacco dipping habit, and I know most guys need a little energy boost to try to get them through a long day. And I'm here to give you a solution for both. Grinds Coffee Pouches. Grinds are coffee-filled pouches infused with your favorite flavors, such as wintergreen, mint, vanilla, and many more. All of the ingredients in Grinds are 100% safe for consumption and will add a pep to your step. So head on over to getgrinds.com and use our promo code CMI15 to get 15% off your order today. Again, that's getgrinds.com and use the promo code CMI15 to get 15% off of your order. It's time to rise and grind with Grinds today.
Whether you need a professional writer to build or expand your online presence, or fresh new designs and new perspective to build your business, where do you start? Tales from the Click Media is committed to telling your story in a way that promotes business growth, consistent branding, and long-term success. So whether you have 1 or 100 employees, no tale is too small to tell. Call us today at 405-620-6200 or visit our website at talesfromtheclickmedia.com.
If you love listening to Crossover Radio, download the Crossover Radio app, available on all major platforms. It's absolutely free to our listeners, and you can connect with us and listen on the go. Crossover Radio. It's radio with a purpose.
You're listening to Surrender to Win with Brian Anderson on Crossover Radio. Radio with a purpose.
And we are back. Gonna finish up taking a realistic view, an uncandid view, if you will, inside the personality of people active in their addiction, inside the addictive personality. So when we left for the break, the last thing I wanted to talk about as far as that stage 2 process goes inside the addict, they have something what they call a reverse in rituals. And that reverse in rituals is all of that negative behavior, all of the unhealthy stuff where the addict is in control, and all of those baffling and all of the just disgusting behavior, the lying, the all of that leads the addict away from any healthy rituals that they used to have. I've seen guys who were fitness gym, stars, and people who were just, heavily involved in their church and civic organizations and community outreach or work or any of these things, healthy stuff, healthy rituals, healthy activities that they did. And when the disease of addiction kicks in and when the addict takes control, all those behaviors lead that addict away from all those healthy rituals, and now all they do is they perform those negative rituals that support the addiction. That's what we call a reverse ritual cycle. And then ultimately in this stage, the person starts to take on a victim attitude in life. This is something else I hear a lot of, is the addict starts blaming everybody and everything for everything. I mean, everything. They get busted by the cops for driving under the influence. It's the cops' fault. They violated, they were profiling, and I'm not saying that some of that doesn't happen, but it's with everything. It's they get busted for possession of a substance. And I've heard, it was a crooked cop, or they're always harassing me, or the DA's unfair. Let's not look that this is the 15th drug charge, but, the DA's unfair. Again, I'm not saying that there's not DAs that are unfair out there, but I'm talking about behavioral patterns that are so very, very common when somebody is in full addiction. They begin to blame everybody and everything for their problems. They take on a victim attitude. And then finally, the last stage of the addiction is stage 3. It's what I call the life breakdown stage. This is where everything starts to fall apart, and they can't even hardly manage some of the simple tasks. I've seen alcoholics who they stop bathing, they stop eating, they stop caring for themselves. You see drug addicts, IV drug users who they have open and festering sores on their arms and their legs, and their abscess that are unbelievably huge, and just constant medical problems, and they just simply don't do anything about it because the drug has taken over everything and is the number one and the only priority. Their life is in the breakdown stage. The addict by this point, the addict is experiencing a tremendous amount of internal pain and deep depression. And the addicts will they'll often feel completely out of control, which causes fear to grow. And as that fear grows, they feel even more out of control. I've worked with hundreds of people who have told me, man, I thought I was losing my mind. I literally felt completely out of control. I didn't know what to do. I was simply lost and terrified. And this is a different kind of fear than most people understand. This is the fear of dying, the fear of living, the fear of using more drugs, the fear of not using drugs, the fear of yesterday, the fear of today, the fear of tomorrow. This is an unbelievable sense of fear. They may even start to have some sincere delusions. Their thinking patterns have broken down. They literally start to have difficulty differentiating what reality is versus delusions. And depending on the drug, I've seen people who are meth addicts, and it's not exclusive to meth, but meth addicts it's pretty profound. They go into a state of psychosis to where they truly can't differentiate between delusions and reality. And it's really, really sad. All the way from seeing and hearing things to delusional beliefs. The line between reality and fantasy is so blurred that individual and active addiction cannot separate the two. And a tragic thing is you often see suicide attempts. And in one's too many, but far too many, you see suicide attempts that are successful. And that's the ultimate demise. That's such a tragic thing that it's just not necessary. Now, most addicts will stay in this stage 3, until some type of intervention happens. And those types of interventions can be all kinds of things. There are some people that are in stage 3, and the intervention may be the legal system. And for whatever reason, that legal thing that happened, that occurred, that was the intervention they needed to wake up or to realize, hey, I don't want to do this anymore. And they go and start seeking recovery and allowing them to get better. The intervention may be family. The intervention may be other people. The intervention may be a whole host of things. The intervention may even be medical. I have heard of people, alcoholics or drug addicts, who had such a significant medical problem. Maybe they had an overdose that was enough for them to say, I don't want this anymore. And they decide to do something to get out of stage 3 and get into recovery. But that intervention is unique to every human being, because for every person who has utilized a medical scenario or a legal scenario or family or church or anything like that, every addict who's ever used that or had that as their intervention to change their life, there's 10 times the amount who had those same interventions that they still didn't do anything to change their life. And that may be the great unknown, or the great question. I still have not figured out why some people will and some people won't. And I think it boils simply down to the person who finally surrenders to the disease of addiction, surrenders and realizes that they are powerless in controlling this addiction, and finally surrendering that they themselves cannot do this anymore on their own. When a human being finally gets to that point, I think that's when they're ready to be able to change their life. And until they get to that point, I think it's very, very, very difficult to maintain any type of long-term sobriety. That includes life in recovery, because just being sober is not life in recovery. People can be just as miserable and sometimes even more miserable sober than when they were active in their addiction. Recovery is a whole different thing. In order to be in recovery, you have to be sober. But just because you're sober doesn't mean you're in recovery. And the quality of life between just being sober and actually living in recovery is night and day. And one of the major goals of recovery is to have a positive conversion back to a normal way of living, a normal state, a peaceful state where we're learning again and we have spiritual growth and we learn a new way of communicating and a new way of dealing with our emotions and a new way of dealing with, honesty and a new way to deal with problems in life. Recovery encompasses all of those. And ultimately we have what we call a spiritual awakening. And that person comes to believe in God and themselves and other higher principles in life. And that's the goal of recovery. Recovery teaches us how to have relationships with people. Relationships that heal and nurture and with healthy communication. Not manipulation, but communication. Recovery is such an amazing, amazing way to live. And it's available for any alcoholic and addict out there if they're willing to put the work in. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. I hope to see you next week, and I hope you have a great weekend. God bless. We'll see you later.
If you or someone you know is struggling with substance abuse, call Rob's Ranch today, 405-253-3838.
Online at robsranch.org or find him on Facebook at Rob's Ranch.